Hi guys! Tonight we step quietly into a white restless world where the road has vanished and the wind has decided your plans for you. You're standing beside a covered wagon as daylight thins to a dull grey snow beginning to fall sideways rather than down. The canvas above you already smells faintly of damp cloth and old dust. Your boots sink with a soft crunch, and each breath feels sharper than the last. Somewhere in the distance, the land you meant to cross today has folded itself shut. You probably won't survive this night in the way you imagined survival. Not comfortably, not heroically, just barely enough to wake up again. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. Now dim the lights and let your eyes close as the story begins to move forward. You pull yourself up into the wagon as the first real gust hits. The wooden step is slick and your gloved hand slides along the side rail until you find purchase. Inside, the space is darker than you expect even before night has fully arrived. The world narrows instantly. The wagon box is not large, not generous, and not designed with sleeping in mind. It is meant for movement, not rest. Still, this is where you will lie down. This is where you will try to sleep while a blizzard learns the shape of your shelter. You arrange yourself carefully because there is no room to be careless. The floorboards are hard, they're cold, pressing up through layers of fabric. A mainstream historical detail that rarely gets emphasised is that most 1800s covered wagons were built with little or no insulation at all. They were essentially wooden crates on wheels stretched with canvas and hope. The canvas is above you now, pulled tight over bent wooden boughs. You can hear it already. A low flapping sound like a sail that has lost its sea. As the snow thickens, the light fades faster than seems fair. You feel the temperature dropping, not in dramatic waves, but in a steady creeping way. Cold does not announce itself. It settles. It finds the gaps in your clothing and the pauses between your breaths. You tuck your hands closer to your chest and shift your weight, trying to make the floor feel less solid. There is a faint smell of animal greasewood smoke from earlier in the day and wet wool. It is not unpleasant, but it is heavy, and it tells you that you are not in a place meant for comfort. The wind rises again louder now, pushing snow against the canvas with a dry whispering hiss. Each gust makes the fabric billow inward, then snap back. The sound is constant enough that it begins to feel like a presence. You realise you will not have silence tonight. Not the kind that lets your thoughts drift. This will be a night of listening whether you want to or not. There is a curious, almost forgotten habit among some wagon travellers that feels strange now. A quirky detail passed down in diaries mentions that a few people tied small bells or metal scraps to the wagon frame during storms. The idea was not to scare animals, but to reassure the sleepers. As long as the sound continued, the wagon was still standing still, breathing with the wind. You do not have bells. You have only the canvas, the wood, and your own steady attempts at calm. You lie back as best you can. Your head rests on a folded coat, and you turn your face away from the side where snow is already beginning to pile. Every movement sends a small shiver through the boards. You become acutely aware of your own body, the way your knees draw up, the way your shoulders hunch without permission. You adjust again slower this time because you're already learning that unnecessary motion wastes heat. Outside, the world is gone. There is no horizon, no path, no sense of direction. Inside, time stretches oddly. You cannot tell if minutes or hours are passing. The blizzard has a rhythm, but it does not care about clocks. Some nights on the trail ended peacefully, even in cold weather, but nights like this were different. Historians still argue whether the greatest danger came from exposure itself or from the exhaustion that followed these sleepless storms. You can feel the argument forming inside your own muscles as they tense, then relax, then tense again. Your breath fogs faintly in the dark. Each exhale leaves a trace that lingers longer than the last. Moisture collects on the underside of the canvas, and occasionally a cold droplet falls, landing on your sleeve or cheek. It makes you flinch every time. The sensation is small, but it carries a sharp reminder that the barrier between you and the storm is thin. Very thin. You try to think about anything else. About home perhaps, or about the morning that might come. But your thoughts keep circling back to the same quiet question. Will this be enough? Enough canvas? Enough clothing? Enough stubbornness? Settlers rarely wrote about sleeping well in these conditions. They wrote about enduring. You feel that word settle into you now. Enduring is different from resting. Enduring means staying. As the blizzard deepens, the wagon rocks slightly, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to remind you that nothing here is fixed. The wooden ribs creak. Snow presses in, packing against the lower edges. You imagine the drift building inch by inch. You imagine the weight. Then you stop because imagining too much is not helpful right now. Instead, you focus on smaller things. The sound of your own breathing. The feel of fabric against your wrists. The faint warmth where your legs touch. You slow yourself deliberately. Sleep will not come quickly, but you are preparing for it all the same. This first night lesson is simple. You are not conquering the storm. You're negotiating with it quietly hour by hour. And as you lie there listening to the canvas speak in the language of wind, you realise this is only the beginning of the night. The longer you lie there, the more aware you become of how little room there truly is. You shift your elbow and it meets a wooden sidewall that feels colder than the air itself. The wagon does not forgive wasted space. Every inch has already been claimed by supplies bed in bodies and the simple geometry of survival. You curl slightly, drawing yourself inward, because spreading out is no longer an option. This is how the night teaches you restraint. You begin to understand that sleeping in a covered wagon is less about lying down and more about fitting in. Your spine presses against uneven boards. There is a knot in the wood just below your shoulder blade, and you make a quiet mental note to avoid it, though you know you will forget once fatigue takes hold. Your knees are bent not for comfort, but because they must be. The wagon has decided the shape of your rest, and you comply. A commonly accepted historical fact is that most emigrant wagons were never intended as living quarters. They were freight vehicles adapted out of necessity, not design. During long journeys west, people slept beneath them, beside them, or not much at all. Sleeping inside during a blizzard was an act of desperation rather than preference. Tonight, desperation feels oddly practical. The wind is far too loud outside, and the snow far too aggressive to consider anything else. As the storm continues, the interior of the wagon takes on a life of its own. Every sound is amplified. A boot shifts somewhere near your feet. A blanket slides with a dry whisper. Someone exhales sharply, then settles again. These are small noises, but in the dark they feel intimate, unavoidable. You're sharing air, warmth and discomfort whether you want to or not. There is a strange etiquette that develops in spaces like this. You learn it without being told. You move slowly. You avoid sudden turns. You apologise in murmurs if an elbow strays too far. Privacy no longer exists in any meaningful way. Instead, there is an unspoken agreement to ignore what can be ignored. Faces are turned away. Eyes stay closed even when sleep does not come. This quiet cooperation is one of the reasons many groups survived nights like these. A lesser-known detail from some trail journals mentions that people sometimes slept sitting up backs against the wagon wall knees, drawn tight simply because there was no way to lie flat. It was uncomfortable, but it reduced contact with the cold floor. You try this position briefly. Your back protests immediately and your neck strains forward. You last only a few minutes before slowly lowering yourself again, resigned to the floorboards and their chill. The canvas above you flexes again, and you feel the wagon shudder slightly as another gust passes. Snow is beginning to collect along the lower edges, insulating and threatening at the same time. You wonder briefly how much weight the canvas can hold before it sags inward. You push the thought away. There is no benefit in measuring danger you cannot change. Your hands find your sleeves pulling them down as far as they will go. Fingers are the first to complain in cold weather. Toes follow soon after. You wiggle them gently, careful not to disturb anyone else. Movement generates warmth, but too much of it invites sweat, and sweat becomes ice later. You are learning to balance effort and stillness, a skill that never quite feels natural. There is an odd comfort in knowing others are awake too. You cannot see them, but you sense their presence in the careful way the wagon remains still. No one sleeps deeply yet. This shared wakefulness becomes a kind of companionship. You're not alone with the storm. You're a small group waiting together for the night to loosen its grip. Some historians still debate whether group cohesion mattered more than supplies during extreme weather on the trail. Was it the extra blanket that saved lives, or the willingness to endure discomfort for one another? Lying here, pressed close to unfamiliar warmth, the question feels less abstract. You suspect the answer is both tangled together like bodies under canvas. The smell inside the wagon deepens as hours pass. Damp wool, leather, the faint sour edge of unwashed clothes. It is not pleasant, but it is human, and it anchors you in the moment. Outside, the world is erased. Inside, everything is very real. Your breath, your heartbeat, the quiet rustle of someone turning over, trying and failing to find ease. You adjust again, placing a folded blanket beneath your hip to soften the pressure. It helps a little. Small improvements matter tonight. You learn to celebrate them quietly. A better angle for your shoulder, a pocket of warmth near your knees. These are victories, even if they would sound ridiculous in daylight. As time drifts on, your thoughts slow, not because you are comfortable, but because your body is conserving energy. You stare into the darkness behind your eyelids. Images come and go without effort. A stretch of road you travelled earlier. The outline of a hill now buried in snow. The memory of a fire that feels impossibly far away. You wonder how many nights like this people endured without writing them down. How many blizzards passed in silence, remembered only in stiff joints and quiet gratitude for survival. The wagon creaks again, settling under the accumulating snow. You listen carefully, then relax when nothing follows. Eventually you stop trying to improve your position. There is nothing left to adjust. You accept the shape you are in. Acceptance, you're learning, is a form of rest. Not sleep exactly, but close enough to get you through the hours ahead. The storm does not ease. The wagon does not grow warmer. But you're still here, breathing steadily, fitting yourself into a space that was never meant to hold a night like this. And as your awareness softens, you drift toward a shallow, fragile half-sleep, knowing there is much more of the night still waiting. As the hours press on, you begin to understand that warmth is not something you create all at once. It is something you assemble slowly, layer by layer, mistake by mistake. You reach for whatever is near you and begin arranging it with care. A coat folded twice becomes padding. A spare shirt turns into a scarf. Nothing is used for its original purpose anymore. Everything is reassigned to the single goal of keeping heat from leaving your body. You pull fabric closer around your chest and neck, sealing gaps where cold air sneaks in. Clothing in the 1800s was heavy by modern standards, often made from wool or rough cotton, and that weight works in your favour now. A well-established historical reality is that travellers depended far more on layers than on blankets alone. Blankets were precious and limited, but clothing could be worn, stacked and reshaped. You feel the pressure of multiple garments pressing down, slightly uncomfortable but reassuring in its density. You tuck the edges of fabric beneath you, creating a crude cocoon. The floorboards steal heat relentlessly, so anything between you and the wood feels like a small victory. Someone near you shifts and offers the edge of an extra covering. You accept it with a quiet nod you hope they can sense in the dark. Sharing warmth is not sentimental here. It is practical, almost mathematical. The air inside the wagon grows thicker as more layers trap not just heat but moisture. You notice your sleeves dampening near the cuffs. Wool holds warmth even when wet, which is one reason it was favoured, but it also grows heavy and itchy. You scratch your wrist briefly, then stop. Even small movements feel expensive now. Energy is currency, and you're budgeting carefully. A curious fringe detail from trail accounts describes people stuffing spare clothing, with dried grass newspapers or even straw, when available, turning garments into makeshift insulation. Tonight you have no straw, no paper, only what you carried with you. You still imitate the spirit of that improvisation, folding and refolding, until the layers trap air as much as they trap heat. Air, you realise, is the real insulator. Warm pockets of it cling close to your skin when you arrange things just right. Your breath slows as you settle into this layered stillness. The storm outside has not softened, but inside the wagon the cold feels less aggressive now. Not gone, just quieter. It retreats from your core and focuses its attention on extremities. Fingers, toes, ears. You pull a hat down low, covering as much of your face as you can without smothering yourself. Breathing through fabric warms the air slightly before it reaches your lungs. You test a new position, carefully sliding one knee closer to your chest. The layers shift, and for a moment cold slips in. You freeze in place until the warmth returns, then continue the adjustment in tiny increments. This is how you move now, slowly, patiently. Like someone learning a new language made entirely of sensation. There is a faint smell of damp wool and unwashed cotton, stronger now that everything is piled close. It's not pleasant, but it signals something important. These layers mean bodies are still warm enough to produce moisture. It is a subtle reassurance. Cold that kills is often silent and dry. This cold is noisy busy, constantly reminding you of itself. Scholars still debate whether hypothermia was widely understood by name during the early 19th century, or whether people recognised it only through experience and grim familiarity. Lying here, wrapped in every scrap you own, you suspect most travellers knew exactly what it felt like long before they had words for it. They knew the numbness, the temptation to stop adjusting, the dangerous comfort of stillness. You fight that temptation gently, not with fear, but with habit. You flex your fingers inside your sleeves. You wiggle your toes just enough to remind them they belong to you. Each movement is small, deliberate, and followed by stillness. The rhythm becomes calming. Move, wait, breathe. The wagon shifts again under the weight of snow, and a faint groan runs through the wood. You tighten your layers instinctively, as if fabric alone could brace the structure. You imagine the snow outside acting as a barrier, now muffling the wind slightly, pressing in like a heavy blanket of its own. Snow insulates too when it behaves. You hope it behaves tonight. Your thoughts drift as your body settles. You think about how many hands touched these clothes before you, how many winters they have already endured. There is comfort in worn fabric. It has survived other nights. It might survive this one with you. Someone near your feet coughs softly, then pulls their covering tighter. The sound reminds you that you are not the only one negotiating warmth in this dark box. Everyone here is solving the same problem in slightly different ways. No one speaks. There is nothing left to say that fabric cannot answer. As your layers finally settle into a configuration that feels workable, you allow yourself to rest into it. Not sleep yet, just rest. The storm continues its work outside, but inside the wagon, you've built a small, fragile island of warmth from whatever you had on hand. It is imperfect, improvised, and absolutely essential. You close your eyes again, breathing slowly through the cloth, letting the heat build and hold. The night stretches on, but for now you're prepared to meet it one layer at a time. Sometime in the night, the sound becomes the main thing. Not the cold, not the cramped space, but the constant voice of wind working against canvas. It is never the same twice. Sometimes it rushes in long, hollow breaths. Sometimes it snaps sharply like a sail caught wrong. The wagon speaks in creaks and soft knocks wood answering pressure the only way it knows how. You lie still and listen because listening costs less energy than worrying. The canvas above you moves with each gust, bowing inward before tightening again. It never touches your face, but it comes close enough that you imagine it might. The sound is louder when the wind comes from the side, softer when it presses from above. Snow adds a muffled hush, then slides away in a faint scrape. This rhythm replaces silence completely. It becomes the background of your thoughts, the tide you float on whether you want to or not. Accounts from the 19th century often mention how travellers learn to judge weather by sound as much as sight. With no forecasts and little warning, people listen to wind patterns the way sailors did. You find yourself doing the same now. A deeper roar suggests open ground nearby. A duller thud hints at snowbanks forming against the wheels. Each variation feels meaningful, even if you are not sure what it means. You try to imagine the wagon as a whole. The curved bows holding the canvas, the ropes pulled tight earlier in the day, the wheels half buried, now spokes packed with snow. The storm is testing every joint and knot. You wonder which parts were rushed, which were repaired too many times already. Then you stop. That path leads nowhere useful. There is a strange intimacy to the noise. In daylight, wind feels impersonal. At night, pressed inches from the fabric that separates you from it, the storm feels close enough to have intent. It pushes, it probes, it waits. Each strong gust makes you tense, then release when the wagon holds. This cycle repeats so often that your body begins to respond automatically. Tension rises, tension fades, breath steadies again. One odd detail preserved in a few emigrant letters describes how some people named the sounds their wagons made, treating them like familiar voices. A certain creak meant everything was fine. A sharper crack meant attention was needed. It sounds almost silly, but lying here you understand the impulse. Giving sound a name makes it less frightening. You start to recognize patterns yourself. That groan is just the frame settling. That snap is the canvas tugging loose snow free. Your breathing adjusts to the rhythm outside. You inhale during the lull between gusts. You exhale as the wind returns. It is not intentional at first, but it becomes soothing. The storm sets the pace, and you follow it. Sleep remains distant, but your thoughts loosen their grip. You are no longer counting minutes. You are riding waves of sound. From time to time, a stronger blast hits, and the wagon shivers more noticeably. The boards beneath you vibrate faintly. Someone nearby stirs, then settles again. No one speaks. Words would feel too sharp here, too fragile against the noise. Silence, when it appears briefly between gusts, feels startling, almost loud in its absence. There has long been discussion among historians about whether psychological strain or physical exposure wore travellers down faster during severe weather. Some argue that constant noise and interrupted rest did as much damage as cold itself. Lying awake, ears tuned to every snap and groan, you feel the weight of that idea. Your body could endure a few hours of cold. It is the vigilance that drains you. Your mind tries to wander, but the sound pulls it back each time. A gust catches the canvas just right, producing a low moan that vibrates through the wagon frame. It sounds almost like an animal call. You remind yourself it is just fabric and air. Still, your heart rate lifts slightly before settling again. You place a hand on your chest, feeling the steady thump beneath layers of cloth. Snow begins to change the acoustics. As drifts build higher against the wagon sides, the wind loses some of its sharpness. The noise grows deeper, more muffled. It feels like the storm is wrapping the wagon in thick blankets of sound. This should be comforting, but it introduces a new worry. Weight, pressure. You imagine snow stacking higher, pressing and testing the canvas from the outside now instead of the wind alone. You listen carefully for signs of strain. A tear, a sudden flap that does not recover. None come. The wagon holds, at least for now. You release the breath you did not realize you were holding. This small relief feels enormous. Your ears grow tired before the rest of you does. The constant noise blurs into something almost musical, a rough, uneven lullaby. You catch yourself, drifting thoughts, slipping sideways, images forming without effort. A road stretching ahead. A fire glowing low. The memory of quiet rooms that feel impossibly distant. Then a sharp snap jerks you back. You tense, then slowly relax when nothing follows. The wagon is still intact. The storm is still raging. Everything is as it was moments ago. You settle again, letting the sound wash over you. Eventually you stop listening for danger and start listening for reassurance. Each creak that resolves means the structure is still sound. Each gust that passes without damage is another small victory. You are learning the language of survival by ear alone. As the night wears on, the sound becomes less something you endure and more something you exist within. It fills the dark, leaving no space for fear to echo. Wrapped in layers pressed close to others, you float on noise and breath, waiting for the storm to decide it has said enough. The cold does not arrive all at once. It does not crash into you or steal your breath in a dramatic instant. Instead, it works patiently, like something with all the time in the world. You notice it first in the spaces where your layers thin, the hollow behind your knees, the curve of your lower back, the place where your sleeve rides up when you move. These small openings become invitations, and the cold accepts everyone. At first it is almost tolerable, a dull ache of background discomfort you think you can ignore. But as the hours stretch on, the sensation changes. It grows quieter and deeper, settling into muscles rather than skin. You breathe slowly, aware that each inhale brings air that is sharper than the last. The wagon interior warmed only by bodies, and breath can never quite keep up with what is happening outside. Period journals from winter crossings describe nights where the cold felt alive, described as something that crept rather than struck. Travellers didn't speak of freezing as a sudden event, but as a gradual surrender of warmth. Lying here, you understand exactly what they meant. There is no single moment when you think, now I am cold. Instead, there is a growing awareness that warmth requires constant effort. Your fingers begin to feel thick, as if the joints no longer belong entirely to you. You curl them slowly, testing sensation. They respond but reluctantly. You tuck your hands deeper into your sleeves, pressing them against your chest where heat lingers longest. Your toes follow the same pattern, a faint numbness at the tips, a mild tingling when you move them. You do not panic. Panic wastes energy. You respond with small, careful adjustments. There was an understanding among 19th century travellers that sleep itself could be dangerous in extreme cold. People knew even without modern terminology that losing awareness could mean losing the will to move. Some groups took turns nudging one another awake through the night, especially during severe storms. You wonder briefly if that will happen here. For now, everyone remains quiet, caught in the same delicate balance between rest and alertness. An unusual note from a winter diary mentioned someone rubbing frozen feet with snow before warming them, a practice that sounds alarming now, but was believed to prevent worse injury. Whether it helped or harmed is unclear, but it reveals how people experimented, constantly learning through trial and error. You're not experimenting tonight. You're conserving. You move only when you must. The cold continues its slow advance. It presses inward, testing your defences. Your breath grows more deliberate. You count exhales not out of anxiety, but as a way to anchor yourself. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Each cycle creates a small pocket of warmth inside your chest. You imagine holding on to it, shielding it from the night. There remains disagreement among researchers about how often hypothermia claimed lives directly on the trail versus weakening people until other illnesses took hold. Lying here, you sense how easy it would be to underestimate the cold. It does not feel dramatic enough to demand attention. It simply asks you to stop moving, to stop caring. You resist that invitation quietly by staying aware of your body. Your jaw tightens slightly as your face cools. You pull fabric higher, covering your mouth and nose, breathing through cloth now. The air feels warmer that way, softer. Moisture gathers quickly, dampening the fabric, but you accept that trade. Warm breath now is worth cold cloth later. Someone nearby shifts their movement, sending a faint wave of cold air across your ankles. You tense, then relax as the layers settle again. Shared space magnifies every change. You learn to read these disturbances without resentment. Everyone is adjusting. Everyone is negotiating with the same invisible force. The floorboards beneath you feel harder as the night wears on. Cold makes everything more rigid. Your hip aches where it presses against the wood. You slide a folded garment beneath it, moving slowly, carefully, until the pressure eases slightly. Relief comes in degrees, not absolutes. At some point, the cold becomes almost familiar. Not comfortable, but known. Your body adapts, drawing boundaries around what it can spare. You notice that your core remains warm enough, even as your extremities complain. This you know instinctively is a good sign. The body is prioritizing making decisions on your behalf. As the storm continues outside, the cold maintains its steady presence. It no longer feels like an enemy charging at you, but like a weight you're carrying. Heavy, constant, but manageable if you move carefully. You do not think about morning yet. You think only about the next small adjustment, the next breath, the next moment of stillness. You close your eyes again, not expecting sleep, but allowing your thoughts to soften. The cold remains patient and persistent, but you're still here, meeting it inch by inch, breath by breath, waiting for the night to loosen its grip. Your breathing becomes something you notice in detail now, not just as a rhythm, but as a physical event. Each breath leaves your body and returns changed. The air you inhale feels sharp and thin. The air you release is warmer, heavier, carrying moisture with it. In the darkness you cannot see it clearly, but you sense it accumulating. The wagon interior is slowly filling with the evidence of living bodies. As minutes pass into hours, that moisture begins to settle. The underside of the canvas grows damp, first in patches, then more evenly. When the wind presses from outside, tiny droplets shake loose and fall. One lands on your cheek, cold. Another strikes your wrist through your sleeve. You flinch, then still yourself again. These moments are small, but they keep you from forgetting where you are. People travelling in the 19th century often remark that wagons could feel warmer than the open air, yet wetter at the same time. Breath sweat and melting frost had nowhere to go. You are experiencing that truth now. The air smells different. Less dry. More lived in. It carries a faint sourness mixed with wool and wood. This is not the clean cold of open land. This is enclosed cold complicated by human presence. You adjust your breathing without thinking about it at first. Slower inhales, longer exhales. You're trying to warm the air before it reaches your lungs. Breathing through cloth helps, but it also traps moisture, turning fabric stiff and cool against your face. You shift the position, slightly exposing one corner to dry air, then covering again. It is a constant quiet negotiation. From time to time, you hear a soft drip. Condensation has collected enough to fall in larger drops now. Each sound feels louder than it should, echoing in the confined space. Someone stirs nearby, muttering softly, half asleep. You remain still listening. The wagon holds this shared atmosphere like a sealed container. Everything inside it is amplified. A lesser-known observation from winter journeys describes how travellers sometimes cracked open a flap of canvas, despite the cold, just enough to let damp air escape. It seems counterintuitive, but too much moisture could make the cold feel worse. Tonight no one suggests opening anything. The wind outside is too aggressive and the risk feels greater than the discomfort. You accept the dampness as part of the night. Your hairline begins to feel cool. Moisture has settled there too, and as the temperature inside dips slightly, it chills against your skin. You pull your hat lower, tucking stray strands away. The fabric is no longer soft. It has stiffened, slightly shaped by frost and breath. You press it down gently, careful not to crack it. Discussions among modern historians continue about how much internal condensation contributed to illness on long journeys. Damp clothing combined with cold created conditions ripe for coughs and fevers. Lying here, breathing air that feels increasingly heavy, you understand how easily a single night could plant the seeds of sickness. Still, there is nothing to be done now but endure. You notice that your breath sounds different inside the wagon. It echoes faintly, bouncing off wood and canvas. Each inhale feels louder than it should. You try to quiet it, breathing more gently as if the storm might hear you and press harder. This is not logical, but it is comforting. Quiet feels safer. Your chest rises and falls steadily. You place a hand there, feeling warmth beneath layers of cloth. That warmth produces moisture, and moisture returns as cold. The cycle repeats endlessly. Heat creates dampness. Dampness invites chill. You are caught in that loop, managing it as best you can with slow breaths and careful stillness. Someone coughs again, deeper this time, then clears their throat. The sound lingers uncomfortably. You hope it is just irritation from cold air. Dry throats were common on the trail, especially in winter. Still, the noise reminds you how fragile everyone here is, how easily a small discomfort can grow into something worse. You shift your head slightly to avoid a cold spot forming beneath it. The fabric there has grown noticeably cooler. When you move, you leave behind a faint warmth that disappears quickly. You settle again, aware that every surface inside the wagon is slowly equalizing with the night outside. Your thoughts drift toward the simple act of breathing itself. How strange it feels to notice something you do without thinking most of the time. Each breath now feels purposeful, measured, necessary. You wonder how many people in the past lay awake like this, counting breaths instead of sheep waiting for dawn. The moisture continues to build. You feel it in your sleeves, in the collar of your shirt, in the faint slickness where layers press together. You resist the urge to shake or brush it away. Movement cools you faster. Instead, you press damp fabric closer to your body, letting warmth return slowly. There remains uncertainty among scholars about how often condensation inside wagons caused more harm than the cold itself. Some believe the dampness accelerated heat loss, while others argue it was simply an unavoidable side effect of survival. Lying here, you suspect both views hold some truth. The moisture is uncomfortable, but opening the wagon would invite something worse. You listen again to the storm outside. The wind has not relented, but the sound has softened slightly. Snow has built up enough to absorb some of its force. The wagon feels more enclosed now, wrapped in a cocoon of cold and damp. You breathe steadily, adapting to this altered air. Eventually, your breathing slows further, not because you are warm or comfortable, but because your body has found a rhythm it can sustain. Inhale. Exhale. Pause. Each cycle is a quiet promise to keep going. You close your eyes, aware of moisture gathering, aware of cold waiting patiently, and you continue to breathe, trusting that this simple act is enough to carry you through another stretch of the night. As the night deepens, you become increasingly aware that warmth is no longer an individual project. It is shared, traded, negotiated without words. Bodies pressed close create pockets of heat that drift and fade as people shift. You feel a shoulder near yours not touching, but close enough to change the temperature of the air between you. That narrow strip feels different, softer, somehow less sharp. You angle yourself slightly toward it, careful not to intrude too much. In wagon travel, closeness was often unavoidable, especially during bad weather. Contemporary descriptions make it clear that personal space was a luxury few could afford on long journeys. Inside this wooden box, the rules of distance have changed. You're close enough to sense another person's breathing, to feel warmth radiating faintly through layers of cloth. It is reassuring and uncomfortable at the same time. Someone shifts near your feet, and a brief ripple of cold air moves through the wagon before settling again. The warmth rearranges itself, redistributing like water finding a new level. You learn quickly that even small movements affect everyone. This creates a strange courtesy. You move less not just for yourself, but for the shared balance of heat. Stillness becomes a group effort. The smells inside the wagon deepen as bodies remain close for hours. Wool damp with breath, leather warmed and cooled repeatedly, the faint trace of last night's meal lingering on clothes. It is not pleasant, but it is grounding. These are the smells of people staying alive together. In some travel journals, writers mention that the odour of close quarters was unpleasant, but oddly comforting because it meant no one had wandered off into the storm. There is an awkwardness to sharing space in this way. Elbows nearly touch. Knees bump lightly, then withdraw. No one speaks about it. There is an understanding that comfort must be borrowed carefully. You sense when someone is too cold by the way they inch closer. You feel when they are warmer again by the way they relax back. This quiet communication replaces conversation. One small, often overlooked detail from winter travel accounts describes how people sometimes arrange themselves deliberately placing those most vulnerable between others. Children in the centre, the elderly near the warmest bodies. It was rarely described as kindness, just common sense. Heat travelled outward and survival depended on where you lay. You find yourself unconsciously protecting the warmest parts of your body, curling slightly, shielding your chest and stomach. Your own warmth feels different now, less contained. It bleeds outward, mingling with others. You feel both exposed and supported. The sensation is oddly calming. You're no longer fighting the cold alone. You're part of a small breathing system, each body contributing what it can. From time to time, tension flickers. A sudden movement. A sharp intake of breath when someone's cold hand brushes bare skin. These moments pass quickly. Apologies are whispered or simply implied. Fatigue smooths over embarrassment. In the dark, identities blur. You're not names or roles here. You're sources of heat. There has been long-standing discussion among historians about how cooperation influenced survival rates during harsh crossings. Some argue that shared resources mattered more than individual preparedness. Others point to discipline and routine as the deciding factors. Lying here surrounded by faint warmth and quiet breathing, you suspect cooperation was not always noble or planned. Sometimes it was just proximity enforced by circumstances. Your body begins to respond to the shared warmth. Muscles loosen slightly. The ache in your hip dulls. The cold at your fingers retreats just enough to be tolerable. You adjust your position carefully, inching closer to the warm air without touching directly. This feels safer, less intrusive. You settle there, breathing slowly. A soft murmur escapes someone nearby, perhaps a fragment of a dream or a reflexive sound. It fades almost immediately. You do not react. Sounds like that feel normal, now part of the wagon's internal life. The storm outside continues, but inside a different rhythm has formed. Breath, shift, stillness. Your thoughts drift to how strange this would feel in any other context. Pressed close to strangers, sharing heat in silence. Yet here it feels necessary, almost inevitable. The night has stripped away unnecessary boundaries. What remains is simple and practical. Stay warm, stay still, stay together. As hours pass, the shared warmth becomes more stable. The air feels marginally less biting. Not warm, but workable. You hold on to that small improvement, letting it anchor you. You know this balance could be disrupted at any moment, but for now it holds. You close your eyes again, aware of the quiet presence around you. The closeness no longer feels intrusive. It feels like a buffer between you and the storm. Wrapped in layers and borrowed warmth, you hover in a fragile calm, letting the collective heat carry you forward through another stretch of the night. At some point in the night, your attention drifts beyond the wagon walls to the animals standing just outside. You cannot see them, but you know where they are by sound and by instinct. A horse stamps the ground, slowly breaking ice beneath its hoof. An ox shifts its weight, leather creaking softly. These noises arrive faintly through canvas and snow, muted but steady. They are signs of a life continuing beyond your narrow shelter. For people travelling by wagon in the 1800s, animals were more than transportation. They were companions, investments, and often the difference between survival and disaster. Period descriptions frequently mention how travellers listened for their animals at night using familiar sounds as reassurance. If the horses were still standing, still moving, then the night had not won yet. You find comfort in that logic now. The wind carries a low distant snort, followed by the soft jingle of harness hardware. The animals are cold too. Their breath steams into the storm, adding warmth to the air around them, though it disappears quickly. You imagine frost collecting along their coats, ice forming in their manes. Yet they endure heads, lowered bodies angled into the wind. There is something steady about their patience. You remember hearing that travellers often parked wagons close together during storms, sometimes forming a loose circle. The animals would be tied inside or along the outer edge, creating a living windbreak. Snow piled against them, insulating as much as burying. This arrangement was not elegant, but it worked often enough to become common practice. Tonight you picture the wagon nestled among others, animals standing guard in the dark. An unusual detail appears in a handful of winter letters describing how some people slept better, knowing the animals were nearby. The sounds were familiar grounding. In contrast, when animals wandered off or went silent, fear spread quickly. Silence in that context meant loss. You listen now, ears tuned carefully. Another stamp, another shift. Relief follows quietly. The presence of animals changes how you imagine the storm. It feels less abstract. The blizzard is not just wind and snow. It is something pressing against living bodies, testing endurance across species. You feel a strange kinship with the creatures outside. You're all waiting together, though separated by canvas and rope. Your body responds to this awareness. Your breathing slows further. The tension in your shoulders eases slightly. You're not alone on this stretch of land. There are hearts beating nearby, hooves planted stubbornly in frozen ground. This knowledge steadies you more than you expect. There has been ongoing discussion among historians about how much attention travellers gave to animal welfare during extreme weather. Some argue necessity forced people to prioritise human survival. Others suggest that protecting animals was inseparable from protecting oneself. Without them, the journey ended. Listening to the quiet persistence outside you, lean toward the second view. Caring for animals was not kindness alone, it was foresight. A sudden gust rattles the harness again, louder this time. You tense briefly, then relax as the sound settles. The animals remain, the rhythm continues. You imagine someone earlier in the evening checking knots, tightening ropes, brushing snow from backs already dusted white. Those small acts echo forward into this moment, buying you a quieter night. Inside the wagon, someone stirs, perhaps responding to the same sounds. You feel the shared warmth shift slightly, then return. The animal noises blend with the wind, forming a layered soundscape that fills the dark. It is not peaceful exactly, but it is consistent. Consistency matters now. You wonder how animals experience nights like this, without the anxiety of plans or destinations, without fear of tomorrow. They endure what is in front of them. You try to borrow that mindset. Stay still, stay warm enough, wait. The thought carries you into a gentler state. Your muscles loosen another degree, your jaw unclenches. The cold remains, but it feels less personal. The storm is something happening around you, not something aimed at you. A final soft stamp reaches your ears, followed by quiet. You listen carefully, then allow your attention to drift inward again. The animals are still there. The wagon still holds. The night continues, but you feel anchored by the steady presence beyond the canvas. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by borrowed warmth and distant breath, you let that knowledge settle. You close your eyes, trusting that as long as those sounds return now, and then the world beyond the wagon is still intact, and for this stretch of the night that is enough. Hunger does not arrive loudly tonight. It settles in quietly, a low awareness rather than a sharp demand. You ate earlier, you remember that though the details feel distant now, food on the trail was rarely about pleasure in winter, it was about timing and density. People understood through experience more than explanation that a full stomach helped the body hold warmth longer. That knowledge lingers in you as a faint reassurance. You shift slightly, feeling the heaviness inside your abdomen. It is not comfortable, but it is useful. Meals before sleep on cold nights were often thick and simple. Salt pork, hard bread softened in liquid, beans cooked until they lost all shape. Such foods took longer to digest, releasing energy slowly through the night. You feel that slow work happening now, a quiet furnace operating beneath layers of cloth. Travel journals from winter crossings often mention the importance of eating even when appetite disappeared. Cold dulled hunger, but skipping meals carried consequences later. You imagine someone earlier insisting everyone take a few more bites before darkness fell. At the time it may have felt unnecessary. Now lying still in the cold it feels like wisdom. There is a faint taste lingering in your mouth, a mix of salt and smoke. You swallow slowly, your throat dry from hours of breathing cold air. Water is nearby, but reaching for it would mean movement exposure and the risk of spilling. You decide against it. Dehydration is uncomfortable, but spilling cold water on yourself would be worse. You settle for a small shift of your jaw, easing the dryness as best you can. One peculiar habit mentioned in a handful of accounts describes travellers chewing small bits of fat or tallow before sleeping in severe cold. It sounds unpleasant, but the idea was simple. Fat provided energy and created a sense of fullness that reassured the body. Whether it truly helped or simply comforted is uncertain, but the practice appears often enough to suggest people believed in it. You imagine the taste, then feel quietly grateful you do not have to try it tonight. Your body responds to digestion with a subtle warmth. Not enough to chase away the cold, but enough to soften it. The chill at your core retreats slightly, focusing its attention again on hands and feet. You accept this trade without complaint. Warm organs matter more than warm toes. The shared space inside the wagon carries faint sounds of others settling after eating. A quiet sigh. A stomach growling briefly before quieting. These noises remind you that everyone here is relying on the same internal process. Food working slowly, heat spreading carefully. There has been ongoing discussion among historians about how well 19th century travellers understood nutrition in modern terms. Calories, metabolism and energy balance were not words they used, yet their habits often aligned with those principles. Lying here, feeling the slow burn of an earlier meal, you suspect practical experience taught lessons theory later explained. You grow aware of how still you have become. Eating earlier allowed you to rest more fully now. Your body feels anchored, less restless. The ache in your limbs remains, but it no longer competes with hunger. That absence feels like a gift. Outside, the storm continues its steady pressure. Inside, digestion creates a gentle rhythm that mirrors breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Warmth pulses faintly with each heartbeat. You focus on that sensation, letting it draw your attention inward. Someone near you shifts, perhaps adjusting after the same realization. The warmth redistributes, then settles again. No words are exchanged. There is nothing to say. The quiet work of staying alive is happening on its own. You think briefly about the morning meal, whatever it might be. Hard bread scraped clean. Coffee if there is fuel, and water that is not frozen solid. The thought feels far away, almost unreal. For now, the only meal that matters is the one already inside you doing its slow, invisible job. Your eyelids grow heavier as your body finds a workable balance. Cold remains at the edges. Dampness clings to fabric. The storm shows no sign of mercy. Yet inside there is fuel. There is heat being made quietly, steadily, without drama. You let your attention soften around that idea. Eating was not a luxury tonight. It was preparation. And as your breathing evens out, you feel that preparation paying off, carrying you gently into a deeper, calmer stretch of the night. Sleep does not arrive the way you expect it to. There is no gentle slide, no clean moment where waking thought switches off. Instead, you drift in fragments. Your eyes close, your body loosens, and then something pulls you back. A sound, a shift of weight, a sharper breath of cold. Each time you hover just on the edge, never fully falling, you realize that what you're doing now is not sleeping as you know it. It is something thinner, a light doze that breaks apart easily. People on the trail learned quickly that deep sleep was rare in conditions like this. Rest came in pieces gathered whenever the body felt safe enough to let go for a moment. You begin to accept that pattern, letting yourself take whatever rest appears without demanding more. Your thoughts slow, but they do not stop. Images drift through your mind without structure. A stretch of road earlier in the journey, a fence half buried in snow, a memory of warmth that feels slightly exaggerated now. These thoughts do not carry emotion. They simply pass like clouds crossing a pale sky. Then a gust rattles the canvas harder than before and you wake fully again. Your muscles tighten instinctively. You listen. The wagon holds. The sound fades back into its steady rhythm. You exhale and allow your body to soften once more. This cycle repeats again and again, teaching you patience. You notice that your dreams, when they come, are shallow and strange. They do not build stories. They offer sensations instead. The feeling of walking without resistance, the memory of heat on your face, the sound of wind without cold attached to it. Each dream dissolves quickly, leaving you unsure whether it happened at all. In journals from long crossings, travellers sometimes describe nights where they slept but never felt asleep. They woke exhausted, yet aware they had rested in some incomplete way. That description fits now. Your body is repairing itself in brief intervals, stitching together moments of recovery wherever it can. You become aware of how your breathing changes as you drift. It grows uneven, deeper for a few cycles, then shallow again as awareness returns. You do not fight this anymore. Fighting would keep you awake. Instead, you allow the rhythm to vary, trusting your body to find what it needs. There is a moment when you think you might finally fall fully asleep. Your limbs feel distant. The cold recedes slightly. Sound fades into a dull background. Then a cough breaks the quiet, sharp and sudden. You are awake again, heart rate lifting briefly before settling. You do not feel irritation, only acceptance. This is how the night works. Later reflection has complicated earlier assumptions about how much sleep mattered compared to simple rest. Looking back, it seems many people survived nights like this, not by sleeping well, but by resting often, lying still, closing their eyes, letting the mind wander without effort. You find yourself doing exactly that. Your body grows heavy, pressed into layers and wood. The ache in your hip returns, but it no longer demands attention. Pain becomes another background element, like wind or cold. Present but not dominant. You adjust slightly, just enough to ease pressure, then let yourself sink again. Time loses shape here. You cannot tell how long you have been drifting in and out. Minutes stretch, hours compress. The storm outside offers no clues. Inside, the only markers are your own cycles of awareness. Awake, not awake, awake again. You notice a faint warmth spreading from your chest outward during one of these half-dreams. It does not last, but it leaves an impression. Your body is still working, still regulating, still choosing to stay alive without asking for permission. Another fragment of sleep arrives, this one quieter. No images, just absence. When you surface again, you feel slightly more settled, as if some small repair has been made. This encourages you. You relax into the next pause more willingly. There is no frustration now, no longing for morning. only the steady task of letting go when you can and holding on when you must. This balance feels intuitive, almost ancient. As if your body remembers how to rest in difficult places, you close your eyes again, listening to the softened roar of wind beyond the canvas. The wagon rocks gently burdened with snow but still standing. Wrapped in layers and borrowed warmth, you drift once more into shallow rest, gathering what sleep you can fragment by fragment as the long night continues. At some point your thoughts turn toward the stories people tell when nights stretch too long. Not spoken aloud now, not in this cold, but remembered. Warnings traded around fires earlier in the journey. Half jokes, half threats. Tales of wagons lost under snow, of people who lay down to rest and didn't rise again. You did not believe all of them then. Lying here, you understand why they were told. Fear does not arrive suddenly. It seeps in the same way the cold does, quietly. You feel it as a tightening behind your ribs, a subtle alertness that refuses to fully relax. You remind yourself that fear has a purpose. It keeps you listening. It keeps you moving just enough. You let it exist without letting it grow. People on the trail carried stories the way they carried tools. They were warnings shaped into memory. A neighbour's cousin who underestimated a storm. A family that pushed on too late in the season. These accounts were rarely precise, but they served a function. They taught respect for weather long before meteorology had language for it. You replay one such story in your mind now, though the details are vague. Something about snow piling higher than expected. About morning light revealing only the tops of wagon bows. You imagine how quiet that must have been. The thought makes you shift slightly. Checking your breathing, checking sensation in your hands. Everything responds. You're still here. One strange habit appears in a few recollections where people deliberately exaggerated dangers when speaking to newcomers. The goal was not accuracy but caution. If fear kept someone alert through the night, it was considered useful. You wonder how many lives were saved by stories that were not entirely true. Your mind drifts toward the edges of sleep again, and the stories soften. They lose their sharpness. Fear becomes background noise like the wind, present but no longer commanding attention. You breathe slowly, grounding yourself in physical sensation. The weight of cloth, the steady rise of your chest, the faint warmth that has not abandoned you. There is still debate among those who study these journeys about how much psychological strain contributed to failure versus physical hardship alone. Some argue that despair weakened people before the cold ever did. Others point out that fear also sharpened awareness and encouraged caution. Lying here, you feel both sides of that argument inside your own body. Fear tightens you. Fear keeps you awake. Fear keeps you alive. A sound outside shifts your attention outward again. Not the wind this time. A brief silence, then the return of movement. The storm has not ended. It has only paused. These pauses feel unsettling. You almost prefer the constant noise. Silence invites imagination. You remind yourself of what you know. The wagon is still upright. The canvas has not torn. The animals were still moving not long ago. Snow insulates as much as it burdens. These facts are small anchors you drop into the dark, giving your thoughts something solid to hold. Your breathing steadies again. The stories lose their grip. They retreat to the edges of your mind where they belong. Worry does not help you now. Awareness does. You choose awareness. The night feels longer when fear is close, but it also feels sharper. You notice details you might otherwise miss. The way the wagon shifts under snow load. The way your body signals discomfort before it becomes pain. This tension feels purposeful, not panicked. Gradually the stories fade into the same soft blur as your dreams. They merge with imagined landscapes and half-remembered roads. You're no longer replaying warnings. You're drifting again, hovering in that thin space between sleep and wakefulness. Fear has done its job. It has kept you alert. Now it loosens its hold. You allow your muscles to relax another degree, trusting that if danger truly arrives, your body will respond. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by breath and quiet movement, you settle back into shallow rest. The night still stretches ahead, but the stories no longer own it. For now, they are just echoes fading as you drift onward, carried by patience rather than fear. You begin to sense the snow long before you see it. There is a change in pressure, a heaviness that feels different from wind alone. The wagon sounds deeper now, less sharp. Each gust arrives muffled as if wrapped in cloth. Snow is no longer just passing by, it is staying. It is leaning against the wagon, settling into corners, filling space. Your mind drifts to the outside shape of the shelter. Wheels half buried, axles disappearing, canvas edges pressed inward where drifts have climbed high enough to meet them. People who travelled this way learn to recognise these changes by sound and feel alone. When the noise softened and the wagon stopped rocking, it often meant snow was building up fast. You listen carefully, measuring each creak and sigh of wood. There is comfort and danger in drifting snow. Packed tightly, it blocks wind and holds warmth close. Too much of it, though, adds weight where the wagon was never meant to carry it. You imagine the slow climb of white along the sides, the way it fills gaps, smoothing sharp angles into gentle slopes. The picture is oddly peaceful, even as it carries risk. Your breath fogs inside the wagon, and the moisture freezes more quickly now. The interior feels stiller, as if the storm has wrapped you in layers of quiet. This change brings a new kind of unease. You have learned the sound of struggle. Silence feels uncertain. You strain your ears, listening for the return of wind, for any sign that the world outside is still moving. Trail experience taught people that snowdrifts could seal wagons shut if storms lingered. Morning sometimes arrived with doors frozen closed and canvas stiff as boards. You picture hands pushing from inside, testing edges, hoping the weight above will shift. The image passes through your thoughts without panic. You file it away, aware but calm. Someone nearby stirs, perhaps sensing the same change. A hand brushes your sleeve, then withdraws. You do not react. The shared space remains steady. No one speaks, but the awareness feels collective. The wagon has become quieter, heavier, more enclosed. A small memory surfaces of someone once explaining that snow when settled was warmer than open air. It trapped pockets of stillness, shielding what lay beneath. That idea offers comfort now. You imagine the wagon nestled inside a thick white shell, protected from the worst of the wind's reach. You let that image replace the more frightening ones. Still the question lingers. How much is too much? The answer depends on many things. The strength of the bows, the way the canvas was stretched, the angle of the drift. People did not always agree on the safest approach. Some insisted on clearing snow during the storm. Others waited until morning, fearing exposure more than weight. The record is mix shaped by outcomes as much as intentions. You check in with your body again. Fingers move when asked. Toes respond slowly, but they respond. Your core remains warm enough. These signals reassure you. You're not losing ground. You're holding steady. The sound of the storm shifts again, briefly louder, then quiet. Snow slides from somewhere above, thumping softly against the side. You tense, then relax when nothing follows. The wagon settles deeper into its temporary nest. Your breathing slows further as your surroundings grow still. The snow has changed the night's character. It feels more contained, less aggressive. The cold remains, but it presses less insistently. You take advantage of this, allowing yourself to sink into the layers beneath you. Thoughts of morning return faint and cautious. Light filtering through canvas, snow reflecting brightness into the wagon, movement returning to stiff limbs. You do not cling to these images. You let them hover at the edge of awareness, gentle rather than demanding. For now, you listen to the softened world outside. The storm has not ended, but it has changed. Snow holds the wagon close, sealing it into the night. Wrapped in damp cloth and quiet breath, you rest within that stillness, trusting that the weight above will remain balanced until dawn finds you. Small sounds begin to stand out now, not because they're loud, but because everything else has gone so still. A faint sniffle breaks the quiet. A soft cough follows, quickly smothered. Somewhere near the centre of the wagon, a child shifts the movement, careful but restless. You feel the vibration through the boards beneath you. True silence never comes when people share a space like this. Children experience nights on the trail differently. They had less patience for stillness and fewer ways to distract themselves from discomfort. People who crossed long distances learned quickly that keeping children warm and calm mattered to everyone. Restless movement spread cold through the shared space. Soothing whispers, gentle pressure from a hand, or simply pulling a small body closer were common responses. You sense that happening nearby now, even without seeing it. Another cough rises deeper this time, then fades. Cold air irritates throats. Dampness makes it worse. You notice your own throat feels tight, not painful, just dry and sensitive. You swallow slowly and breathe through cloth again, warming the air before it reaches your lungs. This habit has become automatic. There is a soft whimper, quickly hushed. A child half awake, caught between fear and fatigue. Someone murmurs reassurance words too quiet to make out. The sound blends into the fabric and breath around you. You feel a subtle shift of warmth as bodies draw closer together, instinctively forming a barrier. People who travelled in these conditions understood that nights were hardest for the young. Cold felt sharper on smaller bodies. Sleep came and went more easily. You imagine the effort it took to keep children still enough to conserve heat, without frightening them further. It was a delicate balance managed one whisper at a time. Your own rest wavers as these sounds ripple through the wagon. You do not resent them. They feel like proof of life. Each cough, each small movement confirms that people are still awake enough to respond. The alternative would be far worse. You notice how the noises change the atmosphere inside. The shared space tightens slightly as if everyone is listening. Breath quiets, movement slow. Even the storm outside feels distant now, softened by snow and absorbed by attention focused inward. A small hand brushes against your sleeve accidentally, then pulls away. The touch is brief, almost apologetic. You do not move. Warmth holds better when nothing shifts. After a moment, the child settles again, breathing uneven but calmer. Later observers have tried to understand how families manage nights like this without breaking down from exhaustion. Some believe routine mattered most. Others think simple closeness made the difference. Lying here, you sense it was often improvisation, responding to whatever sound or movement arose, meeting it with patience rather than plans. Your muscles relax again as quiet returns. The ache in your shoulders dulls. The wagon seems to breathe with its occupants expanding and contracting in tiny increments. Even discomfort feels shared, distributed across bodies and breath. Another cough sounds farther away this time. Someone shifts a blanket. The noise fades. The stillness returns fragile but intact. You allow yourself to drift again, trusting that if restlessness returns, it will be met. Your thoughts soften. You feel the slow pull of shallow sleep resume. The presence of others, especially the small and restless ones, no longer pulls you fully awake. It becomes part of the night's texture, like wind or cold. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet vigilance, you rest again. The wagon holds its people close. Each sound rises and falls without panic. In this shared shelter, even restlessness finds its place, and the long night continues, carried forward by patience and breath. As the night stretches on, your awareness turns inward, not out of worry, but out of quiet observation. You begin to notice the small calculations your body is making without asking permission. Heat gathers in your core and retreats from your fingers. Blood shifts, favouring what matters most. You feel it as a dull heaviness in your limbs, a sense that they belong slightly less to you than they did earlier. You test sensation again gently. A slow curl of your toes, a careful flex of your fingers. The responses are delayed but present. That matters. People who live through winters like this learn to read these signals intuitively. Warmth was not evenly distributed. It never was. Survival meant accepting that some parts would suffer so others could endure. Your legs feel thick as if wrapped in something heavier than cloth. The ache in your joints deepens, settling into bone. You shift a fraction, redistributing pressure, then stop. Too much movement would undo the fragile warmth you have built. You choose stillness, again letting discomfort exist without chasing it away. There is an odd calm that comes with this awareness. You're no longer guessing what your body needs, you are listening. The message is simple. Stay steady. Do not waste energy. Breathe slowly. These instructions repeat themselves quietly, guiding you through the hours. People crossing long distances in winter understood circulation long before they understood it scientifically. They knew numbness was a warning, but not always an emergency. Tingling meant blood was returning. Complete loss of feeling meant action was required. You pay attention now, monitoring changes without alarm. A faint warmth pulses with each heartbeat. You focus on it, letting it anchor you. That rhythm feels dependable, even comforting. Outside, the storm still presses. Inside, your body continues its quiet work adjusting, prioritizing, enduring. You notice that your face feels colder than before. Cheeks exposed to damp air have lost their warmth. You pull fabric higher, covering more skin. Breathing becomes slightly more restricted, but warmer. You accept the trade again. Comfort is always conditional tonight. Your thoughts drift briefly toward morning, then pull back. Thinking too far ahead feels unhelpful. Instead, you concentrate on the next few breaths, the next small check-in with your fingers, the next moment of stillness. Time has narrowed to these intervals. There was never universal agreement among those who later studied trail hardships about how much cold the human body could endure without lasting harm. Accounts varied widely. Some people emerged stiff but intact. Others carried pain for years. Lying here, you feel how thin that line can be. You hope you're staying on the safer side of it. Your muscles twitch once involuntarily. A brief shiver runs through you, then stops. Shivering means heat is being generated. That knowledge reassures you. The body has not given up. It is still fighting in its own quiet way. Someone nearby shifts, perhaps responding to a similar signal. The shared warmth adjusts slightly, then settles. You sense how interconnected these small systems have become. One person moves, everyone feels it. One person grows colder, the balance shifts. You think about how much of this experience would be invisible from the outside. A wagon buried in snow looks still, silent. Inside, countless tiny adjustments are happening. Muscles tensing and relaxing. Blood moving. Breath slowing. Survival unfolds without spectacle. Your breathing deepens slightly slower now than earlier in the night. Each inhale feels measured. Each exhale carries warmth into damp air. You no longer mind the moisture. It is part of the system, now part of the environment you have adapted to. There is a moment when your fingers feel almost warm again. Not truly warm, but less distant. You flex them once more, then let them rest. This small improvement feels meaningful. You store it away as evidence that your efforts are working. The ache in your hips returns sharper for a few moments, then dulls. You do not move. Pain like cold can be managed if it does not surprise you. You breathe through it, letting it settle into the background. Your body feels heavier now, more anchored. This is not sleep exactly, but it is close. A state where awareness narrows and effort softens. You hover there, trusting your instincts to wake you if needed. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet breath and steady presence, you allow your body to continue its calculations without interference. Blood flows where it must. Heat is guarded carefully. You remain still patient, letting the night pass one small adjustment at a time. At some point, effort gives way to something quieter. Not sleep exactly, but a mental settling that feels just as important. You stop actively tracking every sensation. Instead, you allow familiar habits to take over. Thoughts turn toward phrases remembered from home, a line of prayer repeated so often it no longer needs words. A routine from another life played back gently in the dark. People facing nights like this often leaned on whatever internal structures they had built long before the journey began. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others counted breaths or recited bits of song. Not for meaning necessarily, but for rhythm. Repetition steadies the mind when the body's under strain. You find yourself returning to the same thought again and again, letting it loop without effort. The wagon feels smaller now, not because it has changed, but because your attention has narrowed. You're no longer cataloguing sounds or sensations. You're allowing them to pass without response. Wind presses. Canvas shifts. Someone breathes nearby. These things happen, and you let them. A memory surfaces of being told that worry burns energy faster than cold ever could. Whether that was advice or superstition hardly matters. It feels true tonight. You let go of questions you cannot answer. Will the storm last until morning? Will the snow hold? Will everyone wake? These thoughts fade, replaced by simpler ones. Breathe. Stay still. For many travellers, faith was not dramatic or loud. It was practical, a way to accept uncertainty without fighting it. Even those who did not consider themselves deeply religious often repeated familiar phrases in moments like this. Habit carries comfort. Familiar words anchor attention. You feel that anchoring now subtle but real. Your jaw unclenches. Your shoulders sink slightly deeper into layers of cloth. The ache remains, but it no longer dominates. There is space around it now, room enough for calm to exist alongside discomfort. This balance feels sustainable. Looking back, it is difficult to say how much belief itself mattered versus the act of focusing the mind. Some people credited prayer with survival. Others spoke only of endurance. The distinction blurs in moments like this. What matters is that the mind finds a place to rest even when the body cannot. You notice that your breathing has fallen into a steady pattern without conscious effort. Inhale through cloth. Exhale slowly. Pause. The rhythm repeats gentle and predictable. Each cycle feels like a small reassurance that things are still working as they should. A quiet murmur passes through the wagon, perhaps someone else repeating something familiar to them. It is not loud enough to form words. It fades quickly, leaving behind a sense of shared calm. No one needs to know what the other is thinking. The act itself is enough. The storm outside has settled into a deeper hush. Snow absorbs sound, wind loses its edge. The wagon feels held rather than battered. You register this change without excitement. It simply becomes part of the background, another condition you accept. Your thoughts slow further. Images lose detail. Sensations blur at the edges. You're no longer counting time. You're inhabiting it. This feels like the closest thing to rest the night has offered. There is a subtle shift in your chest, a warmth that lingers a little longer than before. You focus on it briefly, then let it go. Attention, like energy, must be spent carefully. You choose to spend it on calm. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet presence, you settle into this mental stillness. Faith, habit, routine, memory. They blend together now, forming a soft structure that holds you upright through the remaining hours. The night continues, but it feels less heavy, carried now by repetition and patience rather than effort alone. Time loosens its grip on you somewhere in the middle of the night, not because the hours have passed quickly, but because you have stopped measuring them. You no longer wonder how long you have been awake or how much longer remains. Awareness thins, stretching out, like a quiet watch that never quite ends. You're not asleep, but you're not fully present either. This is the state people slipped into during long winter nights on the trail. Anyone who'd endured a season like this understood that true rest often came in vigilance rather than dreams. Someone was always half listening, half ready. Even when eyes were closed, attention hovered close to the surface, ready to rise at the smallest change. You notice it in yourself now. A sound shifts outside and your eyes open instantly. Not in fear, just readiness. The wind presses differently against the canvas, then eases. Snow slides somewhere near the wheels. You register it, then let your eyelids fall again. This rhythm repeats so often it begins to feel natural. Wake, listen, rest. Your body feels heavy, anchored by layers and fatigue. Yet your senses remain sharp. You notice when breathing nearby changes pace, when a shared warmth cools slightly, when the wagon settles deeper into snow. None of this pulls you fully awake. It simply passes through awareness like ripples on water. People often describe these hours as the hardest to recall later. Not because nothing happened, but because nothing stood out. Memory prefers contrast, danger, or relief. These hours offer neither. They are made of quiet endurance stitched together by half-conscious moments. You shift your weight, carefully responding to a dull ache along your side. The movement is slow, almost ritualistic. You know exactly how much you can move without losing warmth. That knowledge feels earned now, learned through hours of trial and adjustment. You settle again, listening for reactions around you. None come. The balance holds. Outside, the storm continues, but it no longer feels like an opponent. It feels like a condition. Something that exists alongside you rather than against you. Snow presses. Wind moves. Cold remains. These are facts now, not threats. Accepting them has changed how they feel. Your breathing stays steady, rising and falling with practiced ease. You no longer count breaths. The body has taken over that task entirely. Each inhale warms slightly before reaching your lungs. Each exhale carries moisture into the air that immediately claims it. The cycle repeats without complaint. A faint movement nearby draws your attention. Someone adjusts their position, careful and practiced. You sense the shared warmth shift, then settle again. No words are exchanged. There is no need. Everyone here understands the rules by now. Move only when necessary. Move slowly. Return to stillness. Looking back on accounts of nights like this, it becomes clear that many people remembered them less for what happened and more for how they felt afterward. The stiffness, the deep fatigue, the strange calm that followed survival. What mattered in the moment rarely translated into dramatic stories. It translated into sore joints and quiet gratitude. You drift again into that thin space where thoughts lose structure. Images appear without meaning. A pale sky, a line of fence posts, a fire glowing low. They pass without pulling you deeper. Your mind is resting in fragments just as your body is. Another pause in the storm catches your attention. The wind eases for several breaths. Silence grows heavier than noise. You listen carefully, alert to what might follow. When the wind returns softer this time, you relax. The pattern continues. Tension, release, awareness, rest. There was never a single explanation that fit every survival story from the trail. Some credited luck, others pointed to preparation. Many spoke only of stubbornness. Lying here, you feel how all of those blend together. Preparation got you this far. Stubbornness keeps you still. Luck holds the wagon upright beneath the weight of snow. Your muscles twitch once, then settle. A reflexive check. Everything responds. You let the moment pass without concern. The body knows how to monitor itself even now. The hours stretch on, but they feel lighter. Not easier, but quieter. The cold no longer surprises you. The noise no longer startles. You've adapted to the night's rules, and that adaptation brings a kind of peace. You notice that your jaw is unclenched. Your brow is smooth. These small details matter. They tell you that effort has eased, that endurance has shifted into maintenance. You're no longer fighting the night. You are coexisting with it. Breath after breath, moment after moment, the watch continues. Not dramatic, not heroic, simply present. You remain in this half-awake state, listening and resting, at the same time trusting that if the night demands more of you, you will respond. For now, it asks only patience. And so you remain still, wrapped in cloth and quiet vigilance, letting the long middle hours pass without resistance, waiting for the first hint that the night is finally beginning to loosen its hold. Thoughts drift toward failure now, not sharply, but as a quiet awareness that not every night like this ended well. You do not dwell on it, yet it lingers at the edges of your mind. The wagon feels solid beneath you, but you know that others somewhere else in other winters lay down in similar shelters and did not wake as expected. This knowledge is not meant to frighten you. It is simply part of the landscape of memory that surrounds journeys like this. People who travelled these routes understood risk without always naming it. They knew wagons could collapse under snow if bows weakened or ropes loosened. They knew animals could break free in panic. They knew cold could steal strength quietly. These lessons were not learned from manuals, they were learned from watching and from loss. You feel that inherited awareness now steady rather than dramatic. You listen again to the wagon itself, the way it settles, the way it holds. The creaks you hear are familiar now, almost comforting. None sound sharp or sudden. None suggest strain beyond what the structure has already endured. You allow yourself to trust that assessment, knowing trust is sometimes the only option left. There were nights when people misjudged storms, believing they would pass quickly. Some pressed on when they should have stopped. Others stopped when moving might have kept them warmer. Looking back, it is impossible to draw clean rules from these choices. Outcomes depended on weather terrain timing and luck. You lie still aware that this pause, this decision to endure rather than move, was made earlier and cannot be changed now. Your body feels stiff but not failing. That distinction matters. You check sensation again, slower this time. Fingers respond. Toes complain, but they respond. Your breathing remains steady. These signals tell you that the night, difficult as it is, has not crossed a critical line. A faint sound outside reaches you. Not wind, something heavier. Snow shifting under its own weight. You tense briefly, then listen as the sound settles into silence. No collapse follows. The wagon remains balanced. You release the breath you had held unconsciously. In later years, people told stories about nights like this with a clarity that likely did not exist in the moment. Memory simplifies. It highlights danger or relief and smooths out the long stretches of waiting. Right now there is no clarity, only the steady presence of cold, the weight of snow, and the quiet determination to remain. You notice how your thoughts no longer jump easily. Fatigue has softened their edges. Even the idea of danger feels distant, abstract. This is not denial. It is conservation. The mind, like the body, has limits on what it can hold at once. Someone near you shifts again, then stills. The shared warmth adjusts. The wagon creaks softly. Everything settles back into place. These small movements reassure you more than they disturb you. They confirm that life inside the wagon continues. You consider how fragile this shelter truly is. Canvas stretched over wood, rope tied by human hands, wheels meant for rolling, not bearing snow, and yet it holds, not perfectly, not comfortably, but enough. Enough is the measure that matters tonight. There is no single explanation that accounts for who survived nights like this and who did not. Preparation mattered, decisions mattered, circumstances mattered. Sometimes none of those were enough. Lying here, you accept that uncertainty without trying to solve it. Acceptance feels quieter than fear. Your breathing deepens, again slower, now heavier. The ache in your joints feels older, less sharp. You no longer shift to chase comfort. You let discomfort exist alongside calm. This balance feels earned. Outside, the storm has softened further. Not ended, but changed. Snow absorbs sound. Wind presses gently instead of striking. You sense that the night is moving toward a different phase. Not morning yet, but something closer to it. You hold on to that thought lightly. Too much hope can be tiring. Instead, you focus on staying exactly as you are. Warm enough, aware enough, patient enough. The wagon stands. Your body holds. The night continues, but it no longer feels endless. Wrapped in layers and quiet resolve, you remain still, knowing that endurance is not about strength alone, but about staying present until the world allows you to move again. You sense the change before you see it. There is a thinning in the darkness, a subtle shift that has nothing to do with sound. Your eyes are still closed, yet something feels different. The air inside the wagon seems less heavy. The silence has a new quality to it, not empty but expectant. Morning is not here yet, but it is moving closer. The canvas above you begins to glow faintly, not with colour, but with absence of darkness. Snow reflects what little light exists, sending it back through the fabric in a muted wash. You open your eyes slowly, careful not to move more than necessary. Shapes are still vague, edges blur, but you can tell where the roof curves now. You can tell where the sidewalls rise. People who slept through winter storms on the trail often describe this moment as the first real relief. Not warmth, not safety, just light. Light meant the world had not ended in the night. It meant there would be something to respond to. You feel that reassurance settle into you now, quiet and steady. Your body resists movement at first. Stiffness has taken hold. Muscles feel dense, reluctant. You test a hand, lifting it a few inches before letting it fall back into layers. Sensation returns slowly, accompanied by a dull ache. This is expected. Cold nights leave their mark in this way. You accept it without frustration. The wagon creaks softly as snow shifts outside. You imagine drift slumping slightly as temperatures change. Nothing collapses, nothing tears. The structure holds as it has all night. That realization brings a deeper breath, fuller than any you've taken in hours. You become aware of others stirring around you, not all at once. A sigh here, a slow stretch there. Someone clears their throat. The shared warmth begins to break apart as people test movement. This redistribution of heat brings a brief wave of cold sharper, now that stillness has ended. You brace against it, knowing it will pass. Outside, the storm has quieted into something gentler. Wind still moves, but it lacks urgency. Snow rests where it fell. The violence of the night has given way to a heavy calm. You imagine the landscape buried and reshaped, familiar landmarks erased beneath white. There is a faint sound of an animal shifting nearby, a hoof scraping, a low breath. Relief follows immediately. The animals endured too. That fact carries weight. If they are standing, the night truly is ending. You notice moisture frozen stiff along the canvas seams. The fabric looks heavier, sagging slightly under the burden of ice and snow. You think about the work that will be required soon, clearing drifts, checking harnesses, restoring movement to limbs that feel barely cooperative. These tasks wait patiently. For now you remain still a moment longer. Many accounts from winter travel mention how difficult it was to leave the warmth of shared stillness even when daylight arrived. Moving meant exposure again. Cold air rushing into damp clothing. Pain blooming in joints. You feel that reluctance now. You savour the last seconds of rest before action becomes necessary. Light grows stronger, filtering through the canvas in a soft grey glow. You can see your breath clearly now, rising and fading. The interior of the wagon feels smaller in the daylight, more clearly defined. There is less mystery here, less imagination. That clarity feels grounding. You begin to shift more deliberately, bending a knee, rolling a shoulder. Each movement sends a brief protest through your body, then eases. Blood returns where it had withdrawn. Tingling replaces numbness. You welcome the sensation even when it borders on uncomfortable. Someone nearby speaks softly for the first time in hours. Just a word or two, a check-in. The sound feels almost startling after so much quiet. You realise how long it has been since voices mattered. Now they return tentative but real. The first true sign of morning arrives when light touches the lower edge of the canvas, brightening it slightly more than the rest. This tells you the sun is rising beyond the drifts. You picture it climbing slowly, indifferent to the struggle of the night before. You take a deeper breath, filling your lungs with cold, damp air. Stings slightly, but it feels clean compared to the heaviness of the night. You let it out slowly, grounding yourself in the present moment. Morning has not solved anything yet. The snow still waits. The cold remains. The work ahead is real. But you have crossed the night. That fact settles into you with quiet satisfaction. Wrapped in layers, stiff and tired, you lie there for a final moment, letting light replace darkness inch by inch. The blizzard did not take you. The wagon held. Your body endured. And as the grey glow grows brighter, you prepare to meet whatever this new day asks of you. When you finally push yourself toward movement, it feels like waking a body that does not entirely belong to you yet. Limbs respond slowly, as if they have been loaned out overnight and only just returned. You brace a hand against the wagon floor and sit up a fraction, then pause. The cold rushes in immediately sharper now that stillness is broken. You breathe through it, letting the sensation settle rather than fight it. The canvas door is nudged aside and daylight spills in pale and reflective. Snow has climbed high along the wagon side, smoothing edges and swallowing tracks. The world outside looks unfamiliar, reshaped into gentle slopes and rounded forms. What was once a road is now only a suggestion buried beneath white. You take a moment to look without standing, letting your eyes adjust before your body has to. Someone steps down from the wagon ahead of you. Their boots disappear almost to the ankle. The sound is a soft crunch followed by a slow, careful shift of weight. Snow resists movement at first, then gives way reluctantly. You imagine how heavy it must be, how much energy each step will cost. The thought makes you move deliberately, conserving strength even now. When you finally lower yourself down, the cold feels different. It is no longer creeping. It is direct and immediate. Air bites at your face and hands. Your breath fogs, instantly rising and vanishing in thick clouds. You stand still for a moment, letting your body register this new version of cold, recalibrating after hours of enclosure. The animals come into view next. Frost clings to their coats. Snow has gathered along their backs and flanks, outlining muscle beneath ice. They look tired but upright. Heads lift slowly, ears flick. The simple fact that they are standing carries relief. You feel it settle in your chest, heavier than words. Around you, others begin to move, each at their own pace. Some stretch carefully. Some go straight to work, hands reaching for shovels or boards. No one rushes. Cold punishes haste. You sense an unspoken understanding that the morning must be met gently, even though there is much to do. Snow slides from the canvas in heavy sheets as someone shakes it loose. The sound is abrupt, startling after the muffled quiet of the night. You flinch, then relax. The wagon lightens slightly, bows rising a fraction as weight is removed. That small shift feels like a release of breath the structure itself has been holding. You test your footing, shifting weight from one leg to the other. Blood returns in waves, tingling sharply before easing. It is uncomfortable, almost painful, but it signals that circulation is finding its way back. You flex your fingers again, watching colour slowly return. The stiffness will linger, but it will loosen with time. The work begins without ceremony. Snow is cleared from around wheels, ropes are checked, harnesses are examined for ice and wear, movements are methodical practiced. There is no need for instruction. Each person knows their part, guided by habit rather than discussion. You join in where you can, lifting lighter loads, at first letting strength return gradually. As the wagon emerges from its white cocoon, the scale of the storm becomes clearer. Drifts stretch in uneven waves. Familiar shapes are softened, almost erased. It is difficult to tell where ground ends and sky begins when everything reflects the same pale light. You orient yourself slowly using nearby wagons, trees or hills as reference points. Cold clings stubbornly to damp fabric. Sleeves are stiff, gloves resist bending. You shake your hands gently, loosening ice crystals that formed overnight. Each small motion sends a faint spray of frost into the air. It catches the light briefly, then disappears. There is a strange quiet satisfaction in this work. Clearing snow, restoring order. It feels like reclaiming something that was taken temporarily. The storm had its night. Now it is your turn again. This shift feels important even if it happens without words. Someone laughs softly at a minor mishap of boots slipping, quickly recovered. The sound feels surprising, almost out of place, but welcome. It breaks the spell of the night completely. You realise how long it has been since anything felt light. The sun climbs higher, though it offers little warmth yet. Its presence is enough. Shadows sharpen, details emerge. The world regains definition. You feel your shoulders relax slightly, tension easing as visibility improves. The unknown has retreated. You pause to drink at last, careful and measured. The water is cold enough to sting your teeth, but it refreshes you deeply. Your throat relaxes. Your body seems to accept this small kindness with gratitude. As the wagon is prepared to move again, you take one last look at the place where you spent the night. It looks ordinary now, just another stretch of land, quiet and white. Nothing about it suggests what it demanded from you hours earlier. That contrast feels strange, almost unsettling. You climb back into the wagon with more confidence this time, muscles responding more readily. The space feels different in daylight. Smaller, more familiar, less threatening. You settle among the supplies, aware of how close you came to knowing it too well. The animals are hitched slowly, patiently. Steam rises from their bodies as they shift. The sound of harness leather moving feels comforting, familiar. It signals readiness, continuation. When the wagon finally lurches forward, the movement feels both jarring and relieving. Wheels protest briefly, then begin to roll. Snow crunches beneath them. The journey resumes, altered but intact. You sit quietly as the landscape begins to slide past again, mind still heavy with the memory of the night. It will linger, you know, in stiffness, in caution, in a deeper respect for weather that does not announce itself. For now you focus on the rhythm of movement returning. The wagon creaks. The road, however faint, reappears. You're moving again. And that feels like the clearest proof that the night is finally behind you. Long after the wagon has found its rhythm again, the night stays with you. It does not linger as fear, but as a quiet imprint, something your body remembers even when your thoughts move on. Each jolt of the wheels sends a reminder through stiff joints. Each breath of cold air carries an echo of canvas snapping in the dark. You sit still, letting movement do its work, letting warmth return gradually rather than forcing it. The landscape slides past in pale silence. Snow reflects light upward, softening shadows, muting distance. The world looks gentler than it felt hours ago. You notice how easily danger hides once daylight arrives. The same drifts that pressed against the wagon now seem almost peaceful. It takes effort to remember how heavy they were in the night. As the morning unfolds, conversation returns in fragments. Short observations, practical comments. Nothing about fear or hardship. People rarely speak of nights like that while they're still fresh. There is an instinct to keep moving to place distance between experience and memory before it hardens. You feel that instinct too. You focus on small tasks, adjusting a blanket, checking supplies, watching the animals pull steadily forward. These simple actions help settle your thoughts. They remind you that the journey continues regardless of what it demanded from you along the way. Over time, the stiffness eases, blood flows more freely, sensation returns fully to fingers and toes, pain dulls into background soreness. You know it will resurface later, perhaps in the evening, perhaps days from now. Nights like that leave marks that do not fade quickly. Still you are grateful for movement, for sunlight, for the sound of progress. You imagine yourself years from now recalling this night in pieces, not the entire stretch of hours, but moments. The sound of wind against canvas, the way breath fogged in the dark, the faint glow of morning through snow. Memory will simplify it. It always does. It will turn endurance into a single story easier to carry than the truth. Others around you will remember it differently. Some will recall the cold most clearly, others the silence, others the work in the morning. No two memories will match exactly. That feels right. Experience fragments as it passes through people. The wagon creaks again, a familiar sound now no longer ominous. It reminds you that this shelter, imperfect as it is, carried you through something that could have ended differently. Respect for it settles quietly into you, for its flaws and its strength. As the sun climbs higher, the day grows brighter but not warmer. Winter holds its ground. You do not expect comfort from it anymore. Expectation has shifted. You know now what cold asks of you. Patience, stillness, attention. These lessons stay close. You find your thoughts drifting less often toward fear and more toward gratitude. Not dramatic gratitude, just a steady appreciation for small things that held. Rope that did not snap, canvas that did not tear, bodies that continued to breathe through the long dark. The road ahead remains uncertain. More storms will come. More nights will test endurance in different ways. This one has joined the collection now, another quiet proof that you can remain present through discomfort without being consumed by it. Eventually the memory of the blizzard softens into something almost distant. The wagon moves, the day unfolds, tasks fill the hours, but beneath it all the night has left a trace, a deeper respect for shelter, a sharper awareness of breath, a calm understanding that survival is often quiet, made of small choices repeated until light returns. As the wheels turn and the landscape opens ahead, you rest back against the supplies, letting the motion soothe what the night tightened. You do not rush the feeling away. You let it settle where it belongs, part of the journey now carried forward with you, as proof that you stayed, listened, and endured. Now the day carries you forward, and the memory of the night begins to loosen its grip. The cold fades into a background awareness. Muscles relax, breath deepens. You no longer need to stay alert in the same way. The storm has passed, and with it the need for constant vigilance. As you settle into this calmer stretch, allow your own body to do the same. Let shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Notice how steady breathing feels when it's no longer measured against survival. Nights like that remind you how much the body knows on its own, how quietly it works to protect you when you allow it to. If you're listening to this as you drift towards sleep, take a moment now to rest in that same safety. The wind has eased. The shelter holds. Nothing is asking more of you tonight. You can let go. Sweet dreams.